So the NDIS review has called for more investment in disability support services for children in mainstream health and education settings. The review recommends a new category of support be developed for those who fall outside the NDIS. Skye Kakoschke-Moore is the CEO at Children and Young People with Disability Australia. She says the review's recommendations move the scheme back to its original purpose.
So what we were really pleased to see out of today's report was the acknowledgement that the NDIS can't continue to exist as it is, and what we need is joint investment from the federal government and the state governments to invest in foundational supports.
So how did it get off track with that eligibility criteria?
You know, that's a great question. And I think what we saw happen over the last 10 years or so is people with disability and families really scrambling to follow where the supports were being provided from. And as Australia moved from a system where states and territories were providing inconsistent support for disability around the country to a system where the NDIS was supposed to provide that consistency, the impact of that was that there were some people with disability who were left behind in that transition. And as a result, we saw people flocking towards the scheme, but not enough services to support those who weren't eligible.
Okay, moving on to another recommendation now. How do you feel about the one that stipulates that all providers should be enrolled or registered?
Broadly speaking, we think that this is a positive thing. Where you have people providing supports to people with disability, it's important that there are some safeguards in place to provide some certainty to those receiving support, that the people providing it are the right sort of people that you want to let into your homes, into your lives, into your children's lives. But on the other hand, we would want to make sure that any registration system wouldn't act as some sort of deterrent or barrier to people engaging in disability support, so that families and children with disability aren't left in a position where there aren't anybody to provide, where there aren't enough people to provide support.
And now to a recommendation particularly pertinent for your organisation, a recommendation that investment be increased into disability support services for children with developmental delays in mainstream health and education settings. And just explain for us practically what this means for people who are not familiar with the NDIS.
This recommendation in relation to broadening supports available outside the NDIS for children with developmental delay has the potential to be a real game changer. What we know under the current system is that families can struggle to access timely supports and timely interventions and timely diagnoses. But if we move to a system where foundational supports are funded outside of the NDIS, and that access to those supports isn't determined based on some sort of diagnosis, we're going to see a world where children and young people with disability are able to engage in their mainstream community with the supports that they need, rather than be segregated from their non-disabled peers.
But is this one recommendation that you're going to really have to keep an eye on to see if that support is sufficient?
We're going to have to keep an eye on all of the recommendations in this report. The report really is founded on the basis that there is going to be cooperation between the federal government and state governments and various systems that hasn't happened before. So what's really important is that we don't find ourselves in 10 years' time looking at the need for another independent review into this reformed NDIS because it wasn't achieving the outcomes that this review aimed to. So yes, we'll be taking a very close look at all of the recommendations and making sure that not one single child with disability is left behind or made worse off as a result of the changes that are being proposed.
And finally, to this recommendation about trialling ways to attract and retain workers, has it just been really difficult for some people to find the support they need because there aren't the employees out there?
Absolutely. Workforce challenges are an issue across Australia, but in particular in the disability community. That's because you want to make sure that the people that you have working with you, supporting you, share not only the same values that you do, but they are there to uphold your rights and there to deliver a service in a really safe, supportive and practical way that's going to make a difference. And so it's unsurprising that currently we just haven't seen the workforce be able to achieve all of those things for people with disability, but that's not to say that it's not possible.